Hello and welcome to Paper Trail Pro. My name is Kieran McGurk. In this video I expose Britain's man in Maynooth and examine the cosy relationship between a highly influential Irish Monsignor and a British covert spy and propaganda unit. While Irish Catholic civilians were being murdered by the British Army on the streets of Belfast and hundreds of Irish men kidnapped from their families and interned without trial, this highly influential cleric in Maynooth was secretly collaborating with British spies. The Monsignor would later become Bishop of Limerick, but his toxic legacy includes far more than just his connection to British intelligence. At first glance, the file I found was a brief, quite nondescript information report from one British civil servant in the Dublin Embassy to another British civil servant in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the FCO. Looks can be deceiving though. The Information Policy Report from the Republic of Ireland dated 23rd of September 1971 was prepared by Information Officer PJC Evans for D.N. Brinson, working in the Guidance and Information Policy Department of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Evans' report briefly outlines the objectives and methods of the small and seemingly stretched information section, a few weeks after internment, when hundreds of Irish Catholics were rounded up and held without trial. Nevertheless, it was sent with a secret annex on the IRD activity, which jumped out at me, as it highlighted that the post was run by the secretive Information Research Department. The IRD was a deeply covert propaganda unit that was set up within the FCO, primarily to combat the communist threat during the Cold War. It was also brought into the north of Ireland by British Prime Minister Edward Heath in the early 1970s to be used against the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, and the Irish Catholic population. I have researched and written about it due to the covert management of information, the dissemination of black propaganda in the aftermath of the atrocity and murder of my grandmother in the McGurk Massacre. She was murdered along with 14 other civilians, including 2 children. The British state and its IRD spooks conspired to blame the atrocity on the victims and told the public that they blew themselves up. In the north of Ireland, the IRD helped manage British information policy and reorganise the information activity of agencies including Headquarters Northern Ireland, the Office of the UK Representative and the RUC Information Office. Whilst researching my first book on the McGurk bombing, I accessed a file which proved that the IRD appointed Clifford Hill and Hugh Mooney to the office of Howard Smith, the UK representative of Stormont, who was Whitehall's man on the ground in the north of Ireland. Hugh Mooney liaised closely with the British Army's top secret information policy unit, which was run by expert propagandist Colonel Maurice Tugwell, and reported directly to the General Officer Commanding GOC Lieutenant General Sir Harry Tuzo. Mooney's post of information advisor to the GOC was a cover appointment for the representative of the Information Research Department. In Stormont circles, Hill was simply known as Cliff the Spy. Evans notes that his Dublin section was distributing a variety of IRD written material on aspects of world communism to contacts including the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, the DFA. The DFA, Evans says, though, was small and overworked and scarcely able to digest IRD material, never mind put it to any propaganda use. These were evidently overt channels of dissemination, but Evans also relays that information was being passed in confidence to 1 or 2 trusted local journalists, who wrote about communist affairs, no doubt. He also records that the, quote, second category of IRD activity at this post concerns the indoctrination, if that is not too strong a word, of journalist contacts writing on Anglo-Irish affairs, end quote. It is newsworthy and quite current to find record of a state, and a foreign state at that, seeking to exert control over information that is placed in the Irish public domain via so-called trusted media. Indeed, Evans writes that the stated aim is to induce, as we frequently can, reliable journalist contacts to publish articles in their own names which contain substantial amounts of information provided by the information officer. Nevertheless, such journalistic contacts are the stock and trade of the information officer's job, so I anticipated such IRD activities as these, no matter how shocking it may be to contemplate that Irish media would be so open to foreign propaganda. Furthermore, these are unnamed channels for the dissemination of material manufactured by the British IRD. I'm still looking for the files that name them. There is a named source within this secret annex though, and he was a man in a position of great spiritual and civic influence. Evans recorded that the very well known, high ranking Irish Catholic cleric was a contact for the department and in receipt of certain IRD material. His name was Monsignor Jeremiah Newman, and he was the president of Maynooth College, the training centre for the Catholic priesthood in Ireland, as Evans tells Brinson. Newman later became Bishop of Limerick. Eastern European topics seems to be the primary concern of this selected material, and it is unsurprising that the Catholic hierarchy would have an ear for anti-communist propaganda due to the historical antagonism between the ideologies. Indeed, Evans hints that it was an easy sell, as he writes, quote, "With the priests in charge of religious seminaries who send priests on missionary work abroad, we are preaching to the convert." End quote. Nevertheless, a war was raging in the northeast of the island at that time, and the British administration had recently ranged the highly discriminatory special power internment without trial against its Irish Catholic population, and its Irish Catholic population alone. Indeed, when internment was introduced a few weeks beforehand, on 9th of August 1971, the British Army murdered 11 Catholic civilians in Ballymurphy, West Belfast over 3 days, including the local parish priest. So, for a high-ranking, influential Irish cleric to be in such close contact with a clandestine unit of the British administration and in receipt of its propaganda is highly controversial. Nevertheless, stark questions regarding the relationship between the IRD and Newman remain to be answered. Was this relationship sanctioned by the Catholic hierarchy? Did the Irish government know about the relationship? What propaganda was promulgated? Was it simply anti-communist, or did it expand to include material on Northern Ireland? How long did the relationship last, and were other clerics targeted? What did Newman and or the Catholic Church get from the relationship? And were the young Irish priests aware that the information being fed to them was provided by the highly secret and classified agency of a foreign power, the British state? Jeremiah Newman was a scholar of note who studied in the Louvain and Oxford universities after Maynooth. He taught scholastic philosophy at Queen's University Belfast in the early 1950s before returning to teach at Maynooth, becoming president of the college in 1968. His output as an author was prodigious, with over 20 books on subjects ranging from regional planning to postmodernism in the church and the state. Then, in 1974, he was appointed as Bishop of Limerick, which dragged him from his closeted academic existence. By this time, Ireland was growing more prosperous and Irish society was changing fast, becoming increasingly secular and liberal. Despite his intellectualism and, ironically considering his name, Newman's pastoral leadership was suited for the generation before Vatican II's reforms of 1962. He stringently believed in the unassailable right of the Catholic Church to influence the civil law of Ireland, and he often intervened personally. He railed against secularism and ecumenism, and his dogmatic pronouncements at times caused unease, even amongst the Catholic hierarchy. The Irish Times recorded for posterity two of his most characteristic controversial interventions in his obituary printed on 4th of April 1995. In May 1976, at a time when sectarian killings perpetrated by both sides in the northeast were once more peaking, Newman warned against the dangers to Irish society of secularism, the strident propaganda of minorities, and the effort to conciliate the North, and urged action to prevent the incorporation of an inordinate special position for non-Catholic minorities in the state's laws. Then, the following January, during a Christian Unity Week service of all things, he reminded the cross-community flock that Catholics would still be in the majority in a united Ireland. The Protestant Dean of Limerick, rightly outraged, said that with such a statement the bishop might as well go north and load the guns of the UVF. Newman's views on sexual morals, contraception, divorce, and even disarmament were similarly dogmatic and authoritarian. Nevertheless, Newman's bitterest legacy will be felt by some of those who were vulnerable children in his diocese. In September 2012, the National Board for Safeguarding Children in the Catholic Church in Ireland heavily criticised Newman for inadequate handling of accusations of child abuse by his clerics. In one instance, he knowingly allowed an abusive priest return from England and minister in the Limerick diocese, where that priest is believed to have continued his rape of children. It seems that Newman's strict sexual moral code did not stretch to include the protection of children from his own child-raping priests. So, as well as a paedophile protector, Newman can now add collaborator to his toxic legacy.